The untold truths of America's discovery, myths shattered and realities revealed. The story of America's discovery is one of the most romanticized and controversial narratives in history, filled with tales of heroic explorers and tragic encounters. But what if I told you that much of what we think we know is just a collection of myths and half-truths? Join me as we delve into the mind-blowing reality behind the discovery of America, a story that is far more complex and fascinating than any textbook could ever convey. When we talk about the discovery of America, the name that immediately comes to mind is Christopher Columbus. But did you know that Columbus was not the first European to set foot on the continent? In fact, the Norse explorer Leif Erikson is believed to have landed in North America around 1000 AD, nearly 500 years before Columbus. Imagine that, a Viking exploring the vast, uncharted lands of what we now call America. Eriksson's journey was documented in the Icelandic sagas, and archaeological evidence found at L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada confirms the presence of Norse settlements. So, why do we still celebrate Columbus Day? Isn't it time to give credit where it's due? But the story doesn't end there. Long before any European explorers arrived, the Americas were teeming with indigenous civilizations that had been thriving for thousands of years. The Maya, Aztec, and Inca empires, to name a few, were highly advanced societies with their own complex systems of government, agriculture, and culture. The idea that the New World was a vast, untouched wilderness is one of the most pervasive and damaging myths of all. These civilizations were not only sophisticated, but also incredibly diverse, with hundreds of languages and cultural practices that varied from region to region. How could we have overlooked such rich and vibrant histories for so long? The journey of Columbus in 1492 is often portrayed as a heroic and noble endeavor, but the reality is far more grim. Columbus's initial goal was to find a westward route to Asia, and when he landed in the Bahamas, he was convinced he had reached the East Indies. This misunderstanding led to the term Indians being used to describe the indigenous peoples he encountered. Columbus's arrival marked the beginning of a devastating era for the native populations, as his expeditions and those of subsequent European explorers brought disease, violence, and exploitation. The Taino people, who initially greeted Columbus with hospitality, were among the first to suffer, with their population plummeting from an estimated 300,000 to just a few thousand within a few decades. How does this fit into the romanticized image of discovery we're taught? Another myth that needs to be addressed is the idea that the early European explorers were the first to map and understand the geography of the Americas. In reality, indigenous peoples had developed sophisticated maps and navigational skills long before the arrival of Europeans. The Aztecs, for example, created detailed maps of their empire, and the Inca built an extensive network of roads and bridges that connected their vast territory. These civilizations had a deep understanding of the land they inhabited, and their knowledge was often disregarded or outright stolen by European explorers. How can we ignore the contributions of these native peoples and still claim to understand the history of America? The impact of the European discovery on the indigenous populations was catastrophic. The introduction of diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza, to which the native populations had no immunity, led to widespread epidemics and a massive loss of life. Some estimates suggest that as much as 90% of the native population in the Americas died as a result of these diseases. This demographic catastrophe had far-reaching consequences, including the collapse of many indigenous societies and the loss of invaluable cultural knowledge. How can we talk about the discovery of America without acknowledging this devastating human toll? But the story of America's discovery is not just about the arrival of Europeans. There are also theories that suggest other ancient civilizations may have reached the Americas before them. For instance, some researchers believe that the Polynesians, known for their incredible seafaring abilities, may have made contact with the Pacific coast of South America as early as 500 AD. Evidence for this includes linguistic similarities and the presence of sweet potatoes, a crop native to South America, in Polynesian agriculture. Could it be that the Polynesians were the first to bridge the gap between the Old and New worlds? Another fascinating theory involves the possible pre-Columbian contact between the ancient Egyptians and the Americas. In the 1970s, a stone with hieroglyphic inscriptions was discovered in Brazil, leading some to speculate that the Egyptians may have visited the Americas as part of their extensive trade networks. While this theory remains controversial and lacks substantial evidence, it opens up the possibility that the history of America's discovery is even more complex and interconnected than we ever imagined. What if the story of America's discovery is not just about European explorers, but a global tapestry of civilizations? The role of African explorers in the discovery of America is another lesser-known aspect of this history. Some historians argue that African sailors may have reached the Americas long before Columbus. The presence of African artifacts and genetic markers in pre-Columbian populations, as well as accounts from early European explorers, suggest that there may have been African voyages to the Americas. For example, the 14th century Mali Emperor Mansa Musa is said to have sent a fleet of ships to explore the Atlantic, and some of these ships may have reached the Americas. How does this change our understanding of the global explorations leading up to Columbus's voyages? The impact of the European discovery on the environment is another often overlooked aspect of this story. The arrival of Europeans brought not only disease and violence, but also a profound transformation of the land. The introduction of Old World crops, animals, and farming techniques led to significant changes in the American landscape. For instance, the cultivation of maize corn by indigenous peoples had a profound impact on European agriculture, leading to the development of new varieties and the expansion of farming practices. At the same time, the introduction of horses and cattle by Europeans transformed the way indigenous peoples interacted with the land, leading to new forms of transportation and agriculture. How can we understand the discovery of America without considering its environmental impact? The economic and social changes brought about by the European discovery of America were profound. The Columbian Exchange, the term used to describe the widespread transfer of plants, animals, culture, and diseases between the Old and New worlds, had far-reaching consequences. European settlers brought with them not only new crops but also new forms of labor, including the transatlantic slave trade. The demand for labor in the New World led to the forced migration of millions of Africans, a dark chapter in human history that continues to impact society today. How can we separate the discovery of America from the brutal economic systems that followed? The discovery of America also had a significant impact on global trade and the balance of power. The influx of gold, silver, and other resources from the Americas fueled the European economy and helped finance the age of exploration. This wealth, however, came at a terrible cost, as the exploitation of indigenous peoples and the environment led to widespread suffering and environmental degradation. The discovery of America, therefore, is not just a story of exploration, but also of conquest and exploitation. How can we reconcile the economic benefits with the human and environmental costs? The cultural exchange between the Old and New worlds is another aspect that is often overlooked. While European explorers brought their languages, religions, and customs to the Americas, they also encountered a rich and diverse array of indigenous cultures that profoundly influenced their own. For example, the adoption of tobacco, chocolate, and potatoes by Europeans led to significant changes in their diets and social practices. The exchange of ideas, beliefs, and practices between the two worlds created a new, hybrid culture that continues to shape our world today. How can we understand the discovery of America without recognizing the mutual cultural exchange? The legacy of the discovery of America is a mixed one. While it led to the establishment of new nations and the spread of global trade, it also resulted in the loss of countless lives and the destruction of indigenous cultures. The story of America's discovery is not just about the arrival of Europeans, but about the complex interactions between different peoples and the profound changes that followed. It is a story of both progress and tragedy, of heroism and exploitation. How can we honor the complexities of this history and move forward in a way that respects the past and builds a better future? In conclusion, the discovery of America is a story that is far more nuanced and multifaceted than the myths we've been told. It is a story of global connections, cultural exchange, and human resilience, but also one of violence, exploitation, and environmental degradation. By exploring the myths and realities of this history, we can gain a deeper understanding of the world we live in today and the importance of recognizing and honoring the contributions of all those who have shaped it. So, the next time you think about the discovery of America, remember that the truth is often more mind-blowing than any myth. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more fantastic content. Make sure to tap the notification bell for updates. Your support truly makes a difference.